You're listening to Protecting What Matters by the Ohio Department of Commerce. Commerce is Ohio's chief regulator, and we play a vital role in keeping you safe by protecting your property, your money, and some of the products you use every day. This is designed to bring awareness to important issues and help educate consumers and businesses. Join us as we chat with trusted industry experts focused on providing you with the tools you need to help you protect what matters most in your life.
If you're struggling, there are people and organizations out there ready to stand guard while you heal. There are some fantastic organizations out there. You just got to take that first step and reach out. It's not, it's brave to step out and reach out for help. It's not a weakness.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Protecting What Matters. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, a time to raise awareness about suicide, reduce the stigma around mental health, and to provide support and resources for those affected. I'm Jared Clay, Public Information Officer for the Ohio Department of Commerce's Division of State Fire Marshal. In Ohio and across the nation, first responders face a disproportionately high risk for suicide and mental health challenges compared to the general public. Today we'll be talking about the signs to look for in yourself and your loved ones, and resources that are available to those who are struggling. Joining me today is Mick Ginger, founder and executive director of First Responders Bridge, a group that is tackling the issue with first responders. Mick, thank you for joining me today to talk about this very important subject.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me here today.
Absolutely. This is something we'll discuss throughout this episode, but to get us started, can you talk a little bit about First Responders Bridge, how it started, and really the overall goal of the organization?
Yeah, so I retired from the Columbus Police Department. I retired in 2012. I had 3 of my vertebrae fused together, so I only did 20 years and had to retire. And I was actually living in Virginia near Smith Mountain Lake, honestly just enjoying retirement. When on February the 10th, 2018, we lost Westerville police officers Tony Morelli and Eric Joring when they were murdered. And it just, I came up for the funeral, and that funeral just wrecked me. It hit me really hard. I worked a lot of cases with Westerville. I grew up in Westerville. It just really hit me hard. And so the day after the funeral, I got together with my best friend growing up, Mike Pavlino. And Pav had just retired from the Westerville Police Department as a detective and a SWAT team leader. And he did 4 tours overseas as a Chief Warrant Officer, 3 in the Army. And I said, look, I want to do something. There's so much hurt taking place. I've had 2 of my former partners and close friends die by suicide. I had an academy classmate take his life. And we just sat there and put pen to paper and just said, what are we going to do? And we decided to start a nonprofit. And we called it First Responders Bridge. And it just kind of took off from there.
And you talk about the struggles that a lot of first responders face, and to put some perspective in that for the listeners, each year more first responders die by suicide than all line of duty deaths combined. 85% of first responders have experienced symptoms related to mental health. So this isn't some small problem. This is and not just here in Ohio, it's across the nation. And these first responders face things that I think a lot of us don't even realize.
And I didn't know the problem was there, honestly, until we started the bridge. And we're getting calls at 2-3 o'clock in the morning for people that we had to get help, get them to a facility, and I had no clue. We just decided we wanted to do something to try to help.
Yeah, and you talk about that through your experience as an officer and now through First Responders Bridge. Can you talk about why our first responders are so affected by this problem, especially more than the general public?
What we see at our retreats is by a large margin is complex trauma, where it's that traumatic event day in and day out. It may not be that one big event, but it's just that, death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing, where, they just have an event. But what we do is we go home, and we don't want our families to go through what we go through. So we keep that stuff bottled up inside. And eventually that's going to, lead to, the problems that we have, in our high suicide rates. And Lisa Callender is one of our board members. She's a director of the Employee Assistance Program with the City of Columbus. And she likens it to a bucket. And no matter what profession you're in, we all have this bucket. And all of our traumas and our experiences go in this bucket. And if you don't find healthy ways to empty the bucket, that's what's going to lead to a lot of the problems that we have as first responders.
And you mentioned something there that these folks will go home and they don't want their families to be in it. But from the outside looking in, it looks like whether you're a firefighter, a police officer, any kind of first responder, there's this quote unquote toughness culture. Is there some of that where people are just like, I can handle this, I don't need help, I can just bury it deep inside, and then it eventually festers up?
It's huge. It's huge, especially with the people that have been on a while, people that I came on with. You just didn't talk about this. I couldn't imagine back in the day going and saying, hey, I'm struggling with my mental health. And it's not, it's the stigma of the department. You don't want them to find out that you're struggling. But even more so, I think it's your fellows, say your firefighters, because when you're going into a fire, you want to be able to look to your left and to your right and know that you can trust that person. And so they're afraid to reach out for help. I have a close friend, Dave Gerald's a retired firefighter from Columbus, and he says first responders don't fake being sick, they fake being well. And that is a true statement because, a lot of the people that come to our retreats have been hiding it for so long, but after a while, it's just going to overtake you.
And you mentioned just right there talking about firefighters here at the Department of Commerce, Division of State Fire Marshal. This obviously hits close to home. We work very closely with the state's fire service and all the men and women who make up that industry, if you want to call it that. Some more stats on that. The National Fallen Firefighters Foundation estimates the number of firefighter suicides is over 100 per year. The firefighters and other rescue personnel develop post-traumatic stress at a similar rate to members of military returning home from combat. That's according to a study from the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology. That study also shows that about 20% of firefighters and paramedics meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress at some point in their careers. You listen to these numbers, you read these numbers, they're kind of staggering. But it's also a reminder that what these heroes go through and why organizations like yours are so important.
I saw a stat that they think that the suicide numbers are underreported by a factor of 2.0 because if let's say someone gets in a crash, and it was more than likely a suicide that they were struggling or whatever. If they can rule it an accident or an accidental overdose or something like that, and I get it, I understand that.
Sure. So you hear those, and in all likelihood, those are underreported too.
Correct.
So which just makes this an even bigger problem. One thing I wanted to ask you were talking about kind of the stigma of mental health a little bit ago. Have you seen a change? Because it seems like the general public and just across the board, seems like there's been a shift, more people focusing on mental health. Have you seen a shift where has become less of a stigma?
You're getting new leadership in, and a lot of the people that are moving up the ranks now have been, we've been talking up more since then. And departments have to be intentional about talking about wellness. It has to be a culture where you feel comfortable going and saying, look, hey, I'm struggling. And that they're not going to pull you off the street right away. They're going to let you get help. So we like to call it organizational wellness instead of officer wellness or firefighter wellness because it has to start with the organization. It has to start with the top where you can feel comfortable to reach out. And so that's the way that we kind of like to call it, organizational wellness.
Absolutely. And you spoke a little bit about how First Responders Bridge, came to be. Can you talk a little bit about the makeup of the team? Who is there to support? And doing some research, it looks like you cover a lot of bases, and talk about why that's so important to have that makeup.
So when Pav and I first started this, we knew that we had to put a great team around us because we had no mental health background and we had no nonprofit background, and that was a whole learning experience. So the bridge is made up of first responders that kind of give us the that they've been there. And so when people see them, oh, okay, I trust that person. But it's also made up of clinicians that all have experience working with first responders. If you don't have experience working with first responders, you can't work with our people. Our stresses are just too different. And then business leaders, because we knew, so they don't pay for anything to come to our retreats. And so we knew that we were going to have to get funding to be able to pay for the retreats. And so we have a fairly large board, but it's broken down into 3 segments.
And we'll get to the retreats a little bit later. But one thing you mentioned there, you talk about the first responders and then clinicians who have worked with first responders. It's a unique circumstance.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, again, being on this side, not in your role, but I'm assuming these first responders are not going to respond as well to someone that's just another clinician. They need to have that connection, right?
And the peers, because they have to know that there's confidentiality involved. If I go to you and I tell you, look, hey, something that that I'm struggling with or whatever, I know you're not going to go run and tell someone else. And so our peers were really careful about who we bring in, because we have to know that confidentiality is everything with us. No one, if any of our team members talk about who's attended our retreats, they'll be gone. Because as soon as we start talking about who's come to our retreats, we'll lose all credibility.
That's a great point. We're going to take a quick break, but before we do that, where can listeners go? They want to learn more about First Responders Bridge, the resources available there.
FirstRespondersBridge.org.
It's easy enough. That's firstrespondersbridge.org. We're going to take a quick break, but stay tuned because on the other side, you're going to hear from a firefighter who went through these struggles in one season of his life and sought help through First Responders Bridge.
Think homeownership is right for you, but don't know where to start? The Ohio Housing Finance Agency is here to help. OFA's affordable mortgage rates, down payment assistance, and homebuyer education are designed to prepare you for your journey to homeownership. To learn more about OFA's homebuyer programs and to find out if you qualify, visit myohiohome.org. Homeownership, make it a part of your future.
Thank you for listening to Protecting What Matters. I'm Jared Clay, Public Information Officer for the Division of State Fire Marshal, and I'm speaking with Mick Yinger, Executive Director of First Responders Bridge. Mick, I want to thank you again for joining us to talk about how your organization is helping first responders, especially as we're in Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. We've been talking about firefighters and first responders and how statistically they are more at risk of suicide and mental health issues than the general public. Tim Wagner, he's one of those individuals. Tim has been part of Ohio's fire service for 14 years, struggled with PTSD, and with encouragement from his department and his wife, he sought help through First Responders Bridge. Take a listen.
My name's Tim Wagner. I've been serving in the fire industry and emergency medical services now for about 14 years. In the beginning, I would say it was denial. I didn't realize I changed. I truly couldn't see the difference. I was just living and getting by day to day. My wife pretty much called me out on my uncontrollable temper. I would go from very solemn to just volatile, and it wouldn't take much. I drank a lot. Other than my anger I drank a lot. I played video games a lot, but this wasn't a 2-hour or a 1-hour endeavor. This was an 18-hour endeavor. I didn't move, I didn't do anything. I played video games, and if somebody interrupted me, I got really angry. We were laying in bed one night, and my 2-year-old was giving me a hard time going to bed, and I went in there and actually lit her butt up. Then I came back in and I laid in bed, and my wife was disappointed. I realized my relationship with my children was being impacted when my 3-year-old came down one morning, unprovoked. She had just woken up, and she said, "Daddy, I promise I'll be good today if you don't yell at me." Yeah, that was her. I can truly say that here I'm blessed. I have 2 chiefs that really back mental health. My chief called me out after my wife had already called me out. We were out back training, and he pulled me to the side. He didn't do it for all the guys, and just said, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And I said, "Nothing, I'm fine." "Why?" He goes, "You're not fine." He's like, I can tell. When I was diagnosed with PTSD, they wanted to treat me with, it was basically just throwing pill after pill at me. They just said, "Well, this is going to fix your depression, and this is going to fix your anger, and what if this one doesn't work? We'll up the dosage, and if that dosage doesn't work, well, we'll switch to a new medication." We had gone to a family counselor, and God bless her soul, she wasn't a trauma therapist. It was very hard for her to help me when she didn't understand what I was going through. So at that point, I was angry. Kind of felt hopeless because here I was wanting help and I couldn't get it. I was pretty much destroying my family and everything around me, self-destructing. It never got dark enough where I ever put a pistol in my mouth. But I can't say there wasn't thoughts of it. My wife came home from work the one day and she mentioned the bridge, and I knew nothing about the bridge. I'd never heard of the bridge. At first I was reluctant, and she kept pushing it, and things had got so bad in our house that it was, I don't want to say it was an ultimatum, but it was an ultimatum. When I first walked into the bridge, I was blown away, honestly, at the amount of energy that I felt. But you could tell they were there to actually help you. They cared.
When I was at the bridge, I was listening to Joe Terry on stage, and she was talking about the amygdala and the changes that take place in first responders' brains. And I think at that point, I finally had a better understanding of what exactly I was going through. And then she said when the brain could heal, I realized there was some hope.
The third day of the bridge, I was exhausted. But I can tell you on the way home, I remember looking at my wife and I said, I feel like there's been 100 pounds taken off my shoulder. So when I got home, I took advantage of the free counseling sessions the bridge offered to pay for my wife and myself. We both went through trauma therapy. We both did EMDR. I was remembering things halfway into it that I didn't even know was still, like, I had put away up there. And it's really helped. My relationship with my kids today is head over heels different. And obviously, this doesn't just happen in 3 days. It's a constant work. Every day you're going to work at this. It's not something that you go to the bridge and it's just cured. But they give you hope and they give you the tools.
That's a powerful listen to hear his story. And I'm sure through your work, you've heard countless stories just like Tim's. Are there any other stories that jump out to you that you'd like to share about people who've sought First Responders Bridge for help and have come out the other side?
Yeah, I don't know that we've had a retreat where we haven't had someone tell us that this saved their life or this saved their marriage. And one, I'll keep this very high level for confidentiality,
Sure.
but we had a first responder attend one of our retreats, and he told us later that he was going to give it the first day of the retreat, and then if he didn't feel like he had hope, he brought a gun with him. He was going to take his life in the hotel room that night. And I'm just so proud of our team that, especially the way they have our retreat set up. The first day of the retreat is about letting them know that they're not alone. They're not the only one experiencing, what they're feeling, and fortunately they did that. And now he volunteers for us, and he's just a great ambassador for the bridge.
That's awesome. In that testimonial, we heard Tim Wagner mention other folks in his department and his wife specifically noticing changes in his behavior. For someone listening, what are some signs that they may be able to look out for that would indicate that someone is struggling mentally, especially when it comes to our first responders?
Isolation, if they're starting to isolate themselves, drinking, starting to drink, maybe not that there's anything wrong with drinking, but they're drinking more than they normally would. Hypervigilance, if they, wherever they go, they're always on alert, and maybe to the, I know, we all like to sit with our backs to the door and, or to the wall, but it's even more than that. And then intrusive thoughts and memories. If you're starting to have nightmares or a certain smell brings you back to a scene that you would experience, things like that are some signs to look for.
And obviously we're focusing on first responders here, but I would imagine that for listeners who maybe aren't involved in the first responder community or don't have family members, I imagine it's probably the same, even for just their loved ones who may have a different occupation.
I had a lady reach out about a week ago, and she wasn't a first responder. She was just looking for help, and she had witnessed a murder. Her and her daughter had witnessed a murder, like happen right in front of them. And same thing, she's having the exact same symptoms. So you don't have to be a first responder to experience these things.
So you mentioned her. She reached out. Someone's listening, their family member. What are some steps they can take to help out?
Yeah, find a good clinician. There's some great modalities out there that really help. EMDR therapy, ETMS. There's some really good modalities. We talk about them at our retreats. And just find a good clinician. Find an accountability partner, somebody that you can just talk to, and that'll hold your confidentiality. A close friend that'll give you advice that you need to hear. And then meditation is fantastic. Find a hobby that you really like to do, because a lot of times we'll isolate ourselves and we kind of take ourselves away from the things that we really like to do.
All very good advice, whether you're a first responder, your family's a first responder, or you're just listening and you know someone who may be struggling. We're going to take one final break, but on the other side, you're going to hear more about First Responders Bridge and the great work that they're doing for our first responders.
Thanks for listening to Protecting What Matters. The term finfluencer means someone who uses social media to provide financial-related advice. But do these people have any real financial expertise? Our Division of Securities attorney John Christ has some tips on what you should consider before taking advice from finfluencers.
Well, it's a combination of the terms finance and influencer. And really what this gets back to is a question of where are people getting their information from these days. Most people are getting a lot of information, a lot of exposure to the internet and social media like TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And as a result, we've seen the rise of financial advice coming through these platforms and reaching a lot of investors. So that might be fine, but you need to be aware of certain conflicts that might exist, whether these people are being paid. The fact that a lot of times people aren't licensed to give such investment advice. And just to be aware that just because you see something and somebody's excited about it online does not mean that it's necessarily appropriate for you as an investor.
For more information and tips on investing, visit com.ohio.gov.
Thank you for listening to Protecting What Matters. I'm Jared Clay, and I'm joined by First Responders Bridge Executive Director Mick Yinger. Mick, we've covered a lot already on this episode when it comes to first responder mental health and suicide prevention awareness. But let's talk more about exactly what your organization is offering. People who are listening may want to know the specifics that you provide. We've talked a little bit about the retreat, so let's talk a little bit more about those.
Yeah, so what we did is when we first started, we wanted to find out what other organizations were out there. We didn't want to, reinvent the wheel. And so we met with Ohio Assist and found out they have a fantastic program, Save a Warrior. I have friends that would not be alive today if it were not for Save a Warrior. So our organization, ours is kind of more that first step that, it's educational and informative retreats. It's pretty intense, but not quite as intense as the other two. But what we do is we provide 3-day confidential, expense-free retreats, and for active first responders and their significant others if they have one, where we bring in the best peer speakers and clinicians in the country when it comes to first responder mental health and trauma. In addition to our incredible speakers and clinicians, they participate in discussion groups, panel discussions, tabletop discussions, and it's a pretty intense weekend. One thing that we're going into retreat number 21 now, and one thing after our very first retreat, the reading the evaluations, we learned that we had to do something to lighten the mood. It's an intense weekend, it's an emotional weekend, and so, on Saturday night of our retreat, we bring in a comedian. His name's Vinny Montez. He's a commander with the Boulder, Colorado Sheriff's Department, but he's a comedian. He does comedy shows all across the country, and it's all first responder humor, and it's fantastic. It just lets them let their hair down a little bit.
Sure. And one thing you mentioned that I think most people may not recognize, you also offer it up for spouses,
Correct.
Partners. Talk about the significance of that.
Yeah, and we even have like a discussion group for the significant others because we don't. Maybe when you're new, you're telling her all the fun things, or her, or he, or whatever, all the fun things that you did. But after a while, you start keeping that inside, and so they don't know what we're going through. And we, as first responders, don't understand what we call our second responders. We don't understand what they're going through. And so it just allows us to, how much do you want me to tell you? How much can you handle? And then you set some boundaries that way. And the significant others get, I think, as much as the first responders out of the retreats.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about in our previous segments, too, about helping to recognize and knowing what to do when they start to see those signs, too. So having that availability there is a great thing. You talked about it. It's free of cost, but that also includes lodging, food, everything. It's free across the board.
All they pay for is their transportation. And if they come from out of state, if they fly into Columbus, we have a car service that'll pick them up at the airport with their name on a sign, drive them to the hotel, and so they don't have to rent a car or Uber, and we pay for that as well. We don't want there to be an excuse, well, I just can't afford it. We want to take that away. All of our retreats take place at the Marriott Northwest Hotel in Dublin. It's fantastic food, it's beautiful rooms, and it's a really powerful weekend.
You said your registration's open for number 21.
For number 21, yeah.
So how many times a year do you have these retreats?
We do 4 right now.
Okay.
In 2026, we're adding a 5th retreat. We were blessed enough to get some funding from the state of Ohio, so we're going to add a 5th retreat, and it's going to be for command staff.
Okay.
Because a lot of them, they won't come to the retreats if they feel like it might be somebody that they're, that works for them at the retreat as well. And so we're going to do that. We've now had over 2,000 people from 41 different states and 86 of the 88 counties in Ohio that have attended our retreats. So just really proud of our team. They really work hard, and they really have a heart for our first responders.
And we talked earlier, kind of First Responders Bridge was quote-unquote born in 2018.
Yep.
And the first retreat was 2019. here in 2025. You're already planning number 21. That's moved fast. I mean, you guys have really been rocking and rolling with turning these out.
It has, and something that we added last year, last July, we knew we wanted to do more, and so we were blessed to get some funding. We now provide 6 free counseling sessions to all of our attendees post-retreat. Our clinician team is vetted, vetted clinicians across the state of Ohio. They all have to have experience working with first responders. They have to be trauma informed, and we pay for 6 free counseling sessions post-retreat. And just over a year, a little more than a year, we've paid for over 600 counseling sessions for our first responders and their significant others as well.
You talked about the number of folks who have come to these retreats, of over 2,000,
Yeah.
thereabout. What's been the feedback? Excuse me, you mentioned a few anecdotal stories, but what has been the feedback overall from these?
We track performance outcome measures several ways, and one of them is just a very detailed evaluation form. 99.5% of our attendees have rated the retreats either 4 or 5 stars out of 5. So, again, just really proud of our team.
And we talked about this earlier in the episode, but if someone is listening to this and is interested in attending or has someone in mind they feel could benefit, they can go to firstrespondersbridge.org. But what else can they do to get connected, get signed up? Are there any, I don't want to say prerequisites, but requirements, anything like that?
No, also are at First Responders Bridge on social media. And so they can go there as well. But to sign up, they need to go to our website and ask some questions. You know, they have to be a first responder. They don't have to have they could be a former first responder. They could have done it for a year and got out, and they're welcome to come. And their significant others, if they have one. Depending on the retreat, we're about 65% of the attendees bring a significant other. But yeah, if they sign up, we love to have them.
Absolutely. And this, there very well could be someone listening. In all likelihood, there are people listening who aren't first responders or may not have a first responder in their family, but they want to know how to help. They've heard this, they feel inspired, they want to help. Again, we keep saying it, the heroes in our community. Are there ways for them to get involved to help out? I know you said that you rely on business partners to help fund this, but is there ways for people, whether it's volunteering, donating, other ways for people to get involved?
Yeah, like I said, we never want to charge anyone for coming to the retreats, and so donations always help. We're just being honest, being a nonprofit, and they can go to our website. They can be a monthly donor at $9.11 a month and on up, or they can make a one-time donation, and we're always appreciative of that. Over 90% of all the money that we bring in goes to our programs, so we're really good stewards with our money. Our board does a really good job of that, but then there are some volunteer opportunities. But at the retreats, we're pretty much set. But then we have like a golf outing, and then people like in different parts of the state will put on events for us and stuff like that. I think there's a couple different fire departments that are doing golf outings for us this year, and that's just so much appreciated.
And someone wants to keep up with that, keep up with the golf outings or different events, can they just find that on your website and socials?
Socials, yeah.
Okay.
Maureen Kosat does a fantastic job with our social media platforms, and she's always putting stuff on there.
And going back to, you mentioned it right off the top, businesses. How can they get involved to help?
Yeah, we have some incredible business partners, and they can just reach out via our website as well. There's a contact information there. There's a contact page as well, and Maureen will get in touch with them. And our we do a really good job of really recognizing our businesses. Maureen will go out and do a video with them and really build them up because we appreciate what they're doing for us. Absolutely. And our first responder family.
Well, Mick, I want to thank you for not only joining us for this episode, but for all the work that you and First Responders Bridge are doing to support our heroes. Before we wrap up, is there anything that we've missed or that you'd like to add to talk about the work that your organization is doing?
Just that, if you're struggling, there are people and organizations out there ready to stand guard while you heal. There are some fantastic organizations out there. You just got to take that first step and reach out. It's not, it's brave to step out and reach out for help. It's not a weakness.
Yeah, and that's a funny thing that you mentioned because we talk about the bravery and these folks being heroes, but sometimes it's that part of bravery that's hard for them is
Yeah.
making that call or seeking help, because they're the helpers.
Yeah, one of our another Columbus firefighter friend of mine that's a part of our team, Ryan Arthurs. He talks about what would you do if one of your fellow firefighters fell, in a basement in a fire. You'd do anything you can to save that person, but what are you going to do for yourself and your family? You got to take that step and be brave and step out for your family.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this edition of Protecting What Matters, if you, a friend, a family member, are a firefighter or first responder and are struggling with PTSD or any kind of mental health issues, we encourage you to connect with First Responders Bridge by visiting firstrespondersbridge.org. Check them out on social at First Responders Bridge. And if you or someone you know are struggling with thoughts of suicide, you can also contact the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 24/7 by calling or texting 988. Thank you for listening.